Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Oh,
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today we have a very special panel event episode featuring two targeted individuals, aka TIs, who have been working overtime to expose electronic warfare and mind control as prominent whistleblowers in the TI community through books and blogs, podcasts, and more. Introducing Ron Allen, author and writer of the book 21st Century MK Ultra Slave, a Vintage Transhuman Tale, Tracy with Freedom Protocols on Substack, and me, your host, Emma. This is going to be a very special episode as the topic of targeting has become more and more widespread and more survivors and victims are coming forth and whistleblowing their experiences. I chose two guests who have two very different backgrounds and experiences and who have stepped up to be on the front lines of exposing this terrifying torture being inflicted on countless individuals all around the world. Gang-stalking, V2K, directed energy weapons, and other forms of remote torture are proven to exist. It's society who has been slow to catch on to this being a reality. These covert forms of torture are not only debilitating to those experiencing them, but because this abuse is essentially invisible, victims and survivors are left oftentimes with no help, no support, and no ability to prove that what they are going through is actually happening. I've heard countless times from TIs that when they decide to reach out to get help for any kind, they are abandoned, called crazy, and gaslit back into silence most of the time. And because they are left in 24/7 pain, discomfort, fear, and terror, working a normal job or living a normal life in society is often impossible. The other problem with this type of abuse and torture is because it is so covert and often done with different forms of electricity, there is no one known cure or way to stop what is happening, and victims can end up with excruciating side effects such as burns and burning sensations, rashes, full body pains, wounds, continual ringing in the ears, tinnitus, brain fog, trouble thinking, and so much more. Today, you are going to get a comprehensive understanding of targeting from two amazing survivors and whistleblowers who have lived through this abuse for years on end and who have been on the forefront of researching and exposing why this happens, who it happens to, and solutions for victims and survivors to get relief. Although there is not yet a cure for targeting, it's passionate individuals like Ron and Tracy who are getting us closer and closer to having answers one day, one book, and one article at a time. I'm so honored to have this fantastic guest panel featured on today's episode, and I ask you put whatever you're doing away and give these brave whistleblowers your full attention. One thing you may not know about targeted individuals is that many of them are in so much pain moment to moment that they are unable to do something as simple as a podcast. To have two TIs on the same podcast is groundbreaking in its own right and something we should all definitely be taking advantage of learning from and sharing with others. These two incredible survivors are giving a voice to hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of TIs all over the world and are two people that I treasure. Before I finish introducing today's guest panel, I wanted to give just a couple reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the podcast as a guest or share any information with me, please email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. You can also use this email if you'd like to be a part of my new book series featuring written survivor testimonies, and you can find the video with all the details on how to submit your testimony on any of my podcast channels. And lastly, I'd love your support on Substack, where I'm taking up investigative journalism as an outlet to personally share about my own experiences podcasting and my advocacy work doing anti-trafficking and anti-SRA advocacy, and you can subscribe to me there at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. All of my links are in the show notes, and I'd love your support across all platforms, you guys. Thank you so much for caring so deeply about survivors and for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor and whistleblower disclosures. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest panel of honor, targeted individuals, survivors, warriors, and voices for the voiceless, Ron Allen and Tracy. Hey, you guys, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hello, hello. Good morning, where I'm at.
Yes, I appreciate you both jumping on here with me. Like I said in the intro, this is an ever-growing topic, and I think as part of the I guess army against perpetrators that we're slowly building one person at a time. I think TIs aren't covered enough, and this information isn't talked about as much as, say, human trafficking, or some of the other types of abuse, domestic abuse, pedophilia. We see all of that mainstream, but yet TIs still get thrown into the conspiratorial bucket a lot more often than some of these other forms of abuse that have gone mainstream. So I thought this would be a cool topic to get people around and sort of do a roundtable, bring in people that have different experiences and sort of talk about it as a group and see, what we have in common, what's different, and obviously talk about solutions and everything in between. So I thought I'd start by having you both introduce yourself. For people listening, Ron and Tracy have both done incredible testimonies on my channel, and I will have those in the show notes. So if you guys want to listen to their full testimony, and I encourage you to, please go click on those episodes and listen. For the context of today, we're going to do an abbreviated version, so that way you guys can get a little taster of their lives if you're new here, or a little refresher if it's been a while since you've heard those episodes. So Tracy, let's start with you. If you want to give some background information on your life, where you grew up, just sort of the outline of who you are.
Sure. Okay. So I was born and raised in Cincinnati. I lived in Cincinnati until I was 20, and at which time I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. And this is where I went to school. And I lived here for 11 years. And then I took on a job and was promoted to move to Denver. And so I moved to Denver in 2000 and adopted my son a year later, and stayed in Colorado for the most of the next 23 years. I did take a short sabbatical out of Colorado and went to live in California for a while. So I lived in Culver City and for a few years. And then I met my husband and I got married, and then we moved back as a family of four. We moved back to Colorado. I was married for 9 years. About 5 years into the marriage, my stepson was killed in a car accident, and which sort of, I think, was like the beginning of the end, for a lot of things for my family. But anyway, so he was killed in a car accident. That was in February of 2016. And then a few months later is when a big high profile case showed up in the media, which is what I latched onto for a number of years. And I did quite a bit of outreach, and I was pretty outspoken about my theories and thoughts on this particular case that I believe was rooted in corruption. And this case remains unsolved today. With all of that being said, I'll go into that a little bit more in just a second, but the reason why I paused a minute ago is because I've always hesitated whether or not to bring this up, but I think in the grand scheme of everything that we know to be true today, with how technologies are being used to target TIs, I think it's important for me to mention this. Whether it's relevant in my case or not, I have no idea. But at the time I met my husband, and when I was living in Culver City in California, I was living with a guy who's worked for a company called NextG that he started with his brother. And his scope of responsibility was to plan and sell 5G towers all across the country to the universities. So when you fast forward to 6-7 years later, when my targeting began, and so two of the key people are rooted in military industrial complex, and the other one in CU Boulder, research. Because there's such a strong research theme with the people that were tied to my targeting, I can't help but wonder if that, individual that I lived with at the time, NextG, he started NextG, and then they sold it a couple years later to Crown Castle. Well, Len Bear has talked about Crown Castle on his targeted, he has a channel, who Len Bear is, right? Len Bear, and he has talked about Crown Castle, being the mother of 5G, whatnot. So anyway, again, whether or not it's relevant, I don't know. But so I began to advocate for this, a victim, for a pretty high profile case that I believe was rooted in corruption. I did that from 2016 all the way through when my targeting kicked off, the end of 2019. Towards the middle of 2019, I did take on two additional cases that were also rooted in corruption, and they were local to my community at the time. The first one was in Texas. The other two were in Colorado, where I lived at the time. So my targeting kicked off, as is the case for most TIs, with what I perceived to be a hacking campaign. We started getting intruders on the Wi-Fi, on the routers. You could actually physically see them, hacking into the router. My devices, my accounts, I kept, I called it a very sophisticated hacking campaign that just couldn't be beat. There's just as soon as I had one account of mine hacked into, and I rectified that one and another one, and right behind it, and things were showing up on my laptop, like drives, that were retrieving data, all my files and whatever. So this went on for months. Well, then I lost my job in November of 2019. 6 weeks later, there was something triggered an altercation, a verbal altercation between me and my husband. And then I just hate going through all this. Sorry, it's really hard. An altercation happened in my house, and I kicked a door in my home where I lived for 5.5 years. And 911 was called, and I was arrested, went to jail. I was in jail for 3 days. I got out of jail and was told I couldn't go home to get a quarter to make a phone call, or my purse, or my wallet, or my coat, in the middle of the first snowstorm of the year. But I did try to go home, and law enforcement had my entire neighborhood surrounded, and they were there, and they arrested me again, took me back to jail. When I came out of jail 5 days later, I was experiencing tingling in my fingers. And I was told to go to the ER. I did that, at which time I naively submitted to an EEG and an fMRI of my brain. And about 6 weeks later is when my targeting went into full gear. When I say targeting, I mean, my head was on fire, the ringing in my ears. It was just energy that I didn't know what it was. I started doing research. Meanwhile, I was dealing with a lot of street theater and whatnot. And I was at this point living in hotels. I couldn't return to my home. And fast forward a couple months, my home went up for sale. We sold the home. It was either the day of or the day after. I'm sitting in the hotel room. It's like 11:30 at night. And I hear a crash on the other side of the wall. And then all of a sudden I see a blinking red light on this wall, that wall, the ceiling, like a cat toy, like a laser toy. And I'm like, okay, something, is not right. So I called 911, and the typical, oh, we can come out there, but if we come out there, you're the one that's going to be going somewhere, not, they didn't believe me. Typical TI thing. I dealt with things like street theater, a lot of that at the airport. I dealt with, guys in their late 20s, early 30s, actors trying to pretend like they're CIA or some, and they're doing street theater shenanigans up against the wall, waiting for somebody to show up, their flight to come in. And when the flight comes in, they went to get him, and it was somebody that looked just like my husband. They whisked him away. And then those same three, that was at the Denver airport. Those same three guys were at the Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky airport hotel I was staying at a month later, walking through the lobby with like one of those things, you know, running out like to intimidate me, like I'm under investigation. Keep in mind the whole theme of my gang stalking, and the street theater was around the premise that I was being investigated. Because I did, when I say I did outreach for these cases, you guys, I mean, I left no stone unturned. I mean, I went into the government, you know, files, public records, right? But I was digging up, and everything I found, I was putting out there, right? And so I dealt with a lot of fear that they were coming after my files on my laptop and stealing things and closing down account. And those things did happen, but it was also to instill that fear in me. There was one time, and I hope this is okay. I'm trying to paint a picture of, like, for me with targeting, there's I believe there's a people component to it, but also a demonic component to it that he sort of evolved, and then black ops, and where a lot of the things that I experienced could be carried out by people, could be some, demonic entity, or black ops technology. So for example, the blinking lights, in the hotel room. Well, there was another one when I had just checked into my hotel, and I was walking down the hallway to my hotel room, and all of a sudden I hear what sounds like a submarine sound. Like, in the movies when submarine is submerged underwater and you hear boing, boing, okay. I'm walking down the hotel lobby, hallway, and I hear that boing, boing. I'm like, okay, what the heck is that? I get to my room, I lay down on the bed, and the bed starts vibrating. I mean, come on, that's not people. That's got to be. And then the vibrating happened once when I was at Chili's. Again, I was in the midst of dealing with gang stalkers, sitting at the bar at Chili's. I'm sitting at the booth, and the booth starts shaking. Let's see. I'm kind of looking at my list. Anyway. And another thing. So I struggle with is a lot of the stuff that I dealt with on my devices didn't seem like it was being carried out by people. Although at the time I thought it was people, but now, because there was an intelligence behind a lot of the things that I experienced. But in hindsight now, I believe a lot of it was carried out by AI. So, like, for example, when I was in my car, now officially homeless, my house has been sold. I have nowhere to go. I'm living off of the little bit of equity I had left in my home. And I'm looking, and hotels are getting expensive, $80 a night, that adds up, right? And so I was looking for an Airbnb. Had an Airbnb app. I searched for Airbnb. The only thing that pops up is places between $6,000 and $10,000 a night. That's intentional. So I can't find a place to live. But is it a person? No, because a person can't think that fast when I'm doing a search on Airbnb to only return. And how could that even happen? So, like, another example would be like you got to understand, when people are targeted and being gang stalked, they're isolated, they're alone, they're scared, they have nowhere to go. Everybody thinks they're crazy, so you can't get any support. And it's lonely. It's lonely and it's terrible. Well, one night I went to the hotel lobby to pay for my next night, and my card bounced. And I dealt with some of that too, money disappearing from my account. Anyway, the debit card bounced, and they said, "I'm sorry, your card bounced." Well, I looked down at my phone, and there's a definition of home being flashed on this screen monitor, like home sweet home, where we dwell with our loved ones, that kind of, like, that's got to be AI. That's not a person doing that. I had hate messages sent to the navigation system on my car. Every time I went to, if I get a text or a phone call and I'd click on my phone, the camera would flash in my face. And I'm just telling, all that stuff sounds nonsensical and silly. And I would go to a store, and I'd get out of my car, and I'd run in real quick, and I'd come out. My horns would be blaring, windows would be going up and down, my trunk would be doing, that kind of stuff. So again, it sounds kind of nonsensical and silly, but in the midst of it, when it's going on, and as soon as one thing happens and it's over, there's something coming right behind it. And again, and again, and again, and it goes on for like 13, 15 months. For me, it went on for about 13, 15 months. And so it's crazy. It's absolute insanity.
Can I ask you real quick, Tracy, too? You grew up in a home that didn't have I don't want to say abuse because maybe there was a little bit, but you didn't go through something like satanic ritual abuse, MK Ultra. That wasn't your background growing up.
That wasn't my background growing up, although I have learned through this journey of what the heck is this on my person? Is it a demon? Is it from something that a family member did in the past? Am I dealing with a generational curse? You know, whatever. My mom did, and she'd be okay with me sharing this, but my mom did dabble in some of the occult stuff, you know. Ouija, she had a seance in our house. I was told in this house that I lived in for 8 years that the house was built over a well where a little girl drowned, and then her spirit came up and became my best friend in my room, you know, so that kind of stuff. But it wasn't SRA or
Yes.
Yeah.
Your background, because there's a lot of targeted individuals who went through government programs, and you, on the other hand, represent the demographic that didn't, and is like, well, that wasn't me. Like, why is this happening to me? You know, I thought this happens to people that went in MK Ultra, you know, so I like that you both have sort of those differences, because this does show it can happen to anybody. It's not just one person that they come after. It's not just one gender. It's not just one economic class. It's not just one part of the world. Like, this is a global thing. It can happen to anybody, and it does happen to anybody. It can happen to the person that grew up in a relatively normal or healthy-ish environment, or it can happen to somebody that, you know, went through what Ron did. And did you have any, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tracy. I just wanted to ask you that, but did you want to add anything else to sort of your just testimony of your life, or did you get through everything?
Yeah, sorry, I sort of derailed from that, from my testimony, and I just went right to the detail. But no, thank you, Emma.
You're welcome, and no worries. Did you want to add anything else about, I mean, so since like you've started a blog and you want to talk a little bit about just your advocacy work, or kind of like what you're working on now?
Yeah, so, you know, all of the stuff that I experienced and was going through, you know, that went on from February 2020 until May of 2021. And May 2021 is when I began detoxing. And I ended up getting one of those anti-nano buckets, and I started doing some super, super, super hot soaks in a substance. And I ended up producing what I call black goo, I guess, in the tub. And from that point forward, it was on. I mean, I just did as much research as I can. I came across Dr. Hildy Stanager, who is a toxicologist and works with a lot of TIs and people who have fell victim to government, you know, programs. She helps people. And so I went with a lot of her recommendations, and I've just been detoxing ever since, through rifing, through diet change, through infrared saunas, through the whole 9 yards. And yeah, I have a blog out there. My Substack, godsgirl.substack.com. So
Thank you so much.
I think,
yeah,
go ahead.
No, you're good. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I definitely, all those details are so important. And that was like a big bunch of the questions that people asked. So thank you for sharing some of that. And I know that these lists just go on and on and on. So we'll definitely dive deeper into some of that so people can really understand like what exactly gang stalking is, and you know what types of technology and stuff. But it's really wild how this is just so prevalent, and you know it's extreme, like what you go through. It, like you said, it's just one thing after another. You don't get a break from it. So Ron, let's turn over to you. Let's get a little recap of your life, your childhood, important details growing up, and, where that led you to where you are today.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of different in one respect, one major respect, and that is that being born in 1953, I was brought into the MK Ultra scenario. And, my father was a pilot and radar innovator, onboard radar innovator. And he climbed real high in his field, and he retired as a commander, but more than his rank is his expertise and contribution to radar, onboard radar. And Mr. Lockheed called my father Mr. Radar. And I have been told, and I've come to believe, that people don't attain levels of excellence within the government or military or private corporations unless they are in our government. It's people that are being compromised through their illicit behavior, and that they're duped into, or that they've got a proclivity for. But in the military and government, they also go after the children. And I first had that brought to my attention in Costa Rica, where somebody that I knew, it wasn't connected to the military, or he wasn't, but his father was a scientist and he did government contracts. And this person that I knew was subjected to something, and he could never pinpoint what it was. But he said that he told me that they are after scientists' children. And we had that in common. Although I hadn't done the deep dive at that point. He had, by being arrested and all this other stuff that he was going through, and they knew everything about him already. And but he didn't realize it, and I believe he was MK Ultra, but just didn't know it. And a lot of these things, including TI, you don't know. Nobody's there giving you a ticket or giving you a court date or something to tell you that that's what's going on. So, you don't know. With me, my first 10 days, my mother reportedly said that she didn't want another boy. I was the fourth son. And so she left me at the hospital. She wouldn't even look at me for my first 10 days. And it was during that time that my MK Ultra training began. And again, that was, when it was just being started itself. The CIA started in 47, which another one of my brothers who was MK Ultra was born in 47. And in 2005 or thereabouts, I was living in Costa Rica, and I started, I had this dream, and I wouldn't call it a prophetic dream, but it was more like a memory dream, where I saw the doctor that dealt with me as a baby, and he said he was at a panel, like a 1950s laboratory, and he said, "Oh no, he's woken up." and he came over to me, and I could tell that I was a baby by, perspective or whatever. I'm not quite sure, but I could tell that. And that was the end of that dream. And soon after that, I started looking on the internet to see if I could come up with the nurse that took care of me during those 10 days, because I wanted to thank her. I was 50 or in that range at that time, but I thought that, she would, it was possible she was still alive, and I would like to talk to her. So I started looking on the internet. I didn't find her. I found administrative and senior nurses, but I found a doctor that was there. And the hospital that I was born at, the Valley Forge Army Hospital in Pennsylvania, was they were known for work with people that had the phantom itch, when somebody during the war, somebody gets their arm blown off, but their elbow itches. So they've got this psychology department in the hospital that I'm at, and they're dealing with people coming back from the Korean War at that point. And they'd send all the people that had these psychological things going on to that hospital. And MK Ultra, they did a lot of work with children, and here comes a brand newborn baby. And this dream that I had, as I was looking for the nurse, I found this doctor, and I looked him up after seeing his name, and sure enough, that was the guy that was in my dream. He was older, but it was him. And he died at 100 years old about 3 or 4 years ago. And he was part of the what's it called? It's the Foundation for the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which was organized by the CIA to confront people who are remembering what happened, what transpired in their life as children and so on, because they're able to close your memory off so that you don't remember that. In my case, I was too young, and those memories didn't stay with me until I had that dream. And so my brother, that was part of the program as well, he was born in 47, and he was born in New Hampshire, or Rhode Island, in Providence, Rhode Island, where my doctor grew up and was working in hospitals at the same time. And, I'm not sure when his began. I'm sure it was early on. He gained weight at one point, and, that's an indication that there's something going on drastic. And that might have been when that happened. And I think he was about 9 or something like that at that point. But and I would have been, he was 6 years older than me, so I would have been 3. I suppose it's possible it could have happened the same time as myself. In 1958, I was taken to the hospital and by my mother and separated from my brothers, and I didn't know why. And I was asking her, and she said, it's because you're too short. And, I knew that I was short even at age 5, but it didn't really bother me. So I didn't know why I was going to a hospital to fix something that, was natural. And I remember her taking me there. I remember sitting in the waiting room with the head nurse, who was like a Nurse Ratched type, very stern individual. And that's all that I remember. And then my recurring nightmares started happening, where I was running out of a room at a hospital laboratory type of setting, and and I was being chased by a bear that was standing up, and he didn't have a snout. It was more flat, like a human face, and he didn't have claws. He had fingers, and I had this dream like 3 or 4 times, and it it became apparent to me, later in life, that maybe that wasn't a bear. And I've had situations with Sasquatch. I don't know if you call it sightings. It was more like hearing. But in retrospect, I'm likely to believe that it was a Sasquatch that was in my dream. And again, I attributed this one to being a memory dream. And it was shown to me a few times so that I would remember it being recurring. And growing up was relatively normal. I was a pretty shy boy. I was, hiding behind my mother's dress and all that stuff, and getting together in public gatherings. But in 1970, in 1973, I was out with a friend up in the mountains, and I saw a black helicopter coming, and we were planting some pot plants. So I thought, that we shouldn't be seen doing that. So I said, let's hide under that rock. And we hid under a rock. And the helicopter came over. We were in a short valley, and he hovered over that rock for like 20 minutes. You could have tossed up a rock and hit him quite easily. He was so low. And the next day, I was with a friend, and we drove out to a rock concert. And part of the problem in my life that I also attribute to the MK Ultra is that I spent a lot of my youth intoxicated with psychedelic drugs, and addicted to marijuana for 50 years, and I don't know, 50 whatever trips on LSD, mushrooms, morning glory seeds, PCP, just the list is long. But when I was driving with my friend out to this concert in the desert, I heard the helicopter come back, and it was right over the car. I could see that when he got low, that the dust was kicked up on the side of the road, and I was on LSD, a very, very strong LSD. I was never comfortable with the stronger things, but there it was. And I ended up not wanting to go into the concert. So we were on the road for like 2 hours. And the whole time I was feeling like I was part of a machine, and that, I was being controlled. And I ended up jumping out of the car, trying to end it. And my brother, who was also in the program, asked me afterwards, because I was all beat up. I had scabs and not being able to associate with friends or family, finding other places to be while I healed. And then I saw him, and he was attempting suicide himself. He was in and out of mental institutions, and I never really understood what was the problem with him. And he was never able to articulate anything for me. But I told him, I said, I don't know, when he asked me what it was that caused me to jump out of the car. None of my other brothers were out trying to commit suicide. Why were we two doing it? And I had heard an argument between him and my mother down at the end of the house, and they came running through the television room where I was sitting, and I was about 13 at the time, so he would have been about 19. And they went into my mother's room, and she locked herself in her bathroom. And he was outside the door, pounding on it, saying, how could you let them do that to me? He said, I know I'm one, and I know Ron is too. And, that took me years of chewing on that, because he didn't tell me and I didn't ask. That wasn't the sort of thing it wasn't a very open family environment. And so, then he moved up to San Francisco, and he asked me to move up there with him too. He was always protective of me. And, I was at the bottom, the youngest, and he was in the middle, the second oldest. And, it was something that, getting out of San Diego is, I think I was 20 at the time. It was a good time for me to leave, get out of the, environs that I was kind of stalled in life, and take on a new city and become, adventurous and do something different. And then 2 months later, he committed suicide. And right after he died, I started to experience sleep and paralysis. And it was an odd thing. I didn't understand what was going on at all. And this is the esoteric and technology. Where do they come together? Where do they get separated? I don't know, but I do believe that they interact and get put together. But so my had a new friend. I was over at her house, and she was fond of it's actually formaldehyde poured onto mint leaves, and people smoke it in a cigarette, and it's called PCP. And we smoked some of that, and she was in her bedroom doing whatever, and I was in the living room and had to go to the bathroom. And I walk in the bathroom and I look in the mirror, and it's not me. There's a reptilian in the mirror. And I've never, back in 1974, they weren't on the cover of Time magazine. They weren't talked about in hushed back rooms. They didn't exist. And I'm looking at this thing. I rocked back on my heels. My jaw is dropped. I'm just staring at this thing, and it's got a long snout, more like an alligator type of thing. And uh, then it realized that I could see it. And I could tell that happened because it flinched. And when it flinched, it became me in the mirror. And I went in and I told my friend, and she said, "Oh no, that's evil. Don't say that." And so I thought, well, Jim Morrison says, he's the lizard king. What's wrong with this? But, she said that, and so I did. I forgot about it. And, I put a life together, taking photography at the city college there, and so on, and my life just kind of, I put something together and ended up, as I always have, because being in the Navy, you got to move every 2 or 3 years, and in the military, and so that's what I've done all my life. I'm 70 now, and I've moved so many times that I couldn't tell you how many it is. But in 1990, I was back in San Diego, and I was working at a General Dynamics in an office. And my parents used to go with all their cousins and brothers and sisters, and they'd end up at a mountain spot by a river and pan for gold. And they loved doing it. There'd be, all these motor homes and trailers and everything, and they'd bring their kids, dogs, pets, whatever, and they'd all hang out. And it sounded like a real nice thing for people to do. And as they were leaving to go on this trip, I was living out at the beach. I was part of a street theater group and very active in the town doings, and I I went over to say goodbye and wish them luck on their search for gold. And my father confided that he had been given LSD at sometime earlier. He worked for Grumman at that time. After retiring from the Navy, he went with Grumman and went to Vietnam. He went to 3 wars and all, doing his radar stuff. And he was telling me about this being he didn't give consent to being given this LSD, and he didn't like it, and but this is the first time he'd mentioned it. When I jumped out of the car, or when I come home floating through the room or stuff like that, he had many opportunities to say something about this, but he didn't. But on this occasion, he did. About a week before that, my mother had been, I was talking with her, and I told her that I was hearing voices, the V2K, and she, the veins popped out on her neck. She got, this scowl look on her face. She was just angry to no extent. And she said, "Are you hearing voices?" And I said, "No, I mean, I had already said that I was, and it started with me hearing voices. I heard a rock hit something, and before I could even tell that something had happened, something had taken place, a voice said, "Oh, it was just a rock." And at that point, right then and there, I knew I was in for it. Something that was that quick, whether it was AI or off planet or, technology, the United States Navy. I don't know, but it was, it impressed me because it happened. Their description of what had happened came out faster than I could take in that something had happened. And I thought, oh boy, am I in for it. So they died. They were on that trip, and they were the first ones up there. My father had some new ideas, and he was always, trying to invent stuff, and he came up with this idea that the river used to come through here, and that's where we'll be digging. And sure enough, in their pan in their trailer, there was gold in there. So I think they were, finding what they were after. But there was vomit in the toilet, and just it was horrible. It was, both my parents at the same time. I was 36 at the time. And we had the wake, the funeral, the viewing, all that, all the relatives all came, and they were quite popular in the family. So everybody was there. And I walked right by the caskets during the viewing because I didn't want to see. I had seen my brother Gordon after he committed suicide in 1974, and in 1990, I didn't relish the idea of seeing my parents dead. So I went through past the coffins into the back room. And my oldest brother came in and said, my mother's oldest brother wanted me to go see view the bodies. And I said, I don't want to. And my older brother said, well, I think you have to, if not for yourself, for our uncle. So I went back in and I saw them, and they were beat up. They had to be glued and taped and wired back together to even look human, which, they certainly didn't look like themselves. And so the vehicle had been brought back, and there was no marks on it whatsoever. They said the tie rod was broken, but there was no indication whatsoever that there was an accident. And my one of my aunts that went and picked up the vehicle said that the police report did not reflect what they saw at all. That it was different. And at first they had roped off the scene as an accident or as a crime scene, a murder. Their bodies were at the front of the car and front of the seats and the footwell. And me and my brothers just, we didn't believe it, the story that was promoted at all. And, I still don't, I think it was a hit. And therefore, I think it was part of all of this. that my brother and myself had gone through, and they were about to reveal or something like that, and taken out because of it. And so after they died, we're in the family house, and I'm there with my two brothers, two living brothers, and my a good friend, and I feel this electronic leash put on me, and I'd never felt anything like that. And I asked everybody in the room if anybody else had just felt that. Nobody felt anything, but it was definitely technology attached to me. So that's the MK Ultra. And I don't think it's ever gone away. I think once you're MK Ultra, I think you're always MK Ultra. That's CIA, but the FBI are the lapdogs of the CIA, and so I continued work in the aerospace industry, and my new I had moved up to Seattle at the time, and my new employer, we were making rocket engines for satellites, and our biggest customer was Lockheed Martin. So I was back with them again, my father having been with them, and now it was my turn. And they had me working with DARPA in developing a client-based software reporting device, as well as document repository. And I set it all up, and they told me that they were going to use it on Lockheed Martin with all their suppliers. They were quite pleased with it. And DARPA turned it over to a private industry, which is their standard. They do the development in DARPA, and then they hand it off. And that's where my gang stalking and things started. It was going badly, and I try to picture myself as a nice guy. I try to put my best foot forward, but sometimes if you want your way, it doesn't always come across that way. And especially if somebody has a particular thing they want to do, and all of a sudden I'm in the middle of this turmoil at work, and I just, I was getting to my wit's end. I was really tired of it, and I walk outside. I go up to a gate, and I feel my heart stop, and I knew it wasn't happenstance or lack of exercise or whatever. It was a mechanical, technological feeling where my heart stopped. And I just, I've been through a lot of things in my life at that point, and I just, didn't want to deal with that. So I quit my job and had a friend that moved down to Mexico. So I went down to be with her down there. And I was, that was in 2000. And I stayed in Mexico for about a year and a half, and then ended up driving down to Costa Rica. Not that I knew anyone there, but I was, after better waves, I was surfing and adventure. And so I end up being a photographer, a surf photographer, and maybe in 2005, something like that, is when I had that dream about the doctors saying, "Oh no, he's awake." And this guy came up to my, I was working for this guy. He Spaniard building this bizarre high roof building out of big poles and very rustic. And so I was out roughing up these poles, getting the bark off of them, and this guy pulls up in the alley right next to me, and he gets out of his car and he holds a GPS unit in the air, and then he smiled and got back in the cab and they drove off. So that's when they got me linked up to the GPS unit. Incidentally, the GPS was one of my programs when I was at the satellite company building motors. In 2010, the things changed for me. I was hearing things like, well, he's not taking it seriously, he's just having fun. And this is stuff echoing in my head like V2K. And I started having arthritis to the point where I couldn't walk. My feet hurt so much, and I couldn't. So that kicked me out of the ocean, because you can't surf if you can't stand. And my back hurt, and I had a couple different. My elbow got real bulby pus, or I don't know what it was, but it was huge, and all these things started happening to me. And so I stopped being a photographer because I couldn't carry my camera, and I moved to the mountains, little valley, big mountain lining the edge. And there I started having more of these situations with reptilian, where I saw them standing around me in a round room with, 4 of them standing over me and putting their hands in my abdomen, and that was a dream. And then I was having these dreams where dolphins would come up and get right in my face, and there'd be whales in the background. And I've heard that, the dolphin is the reptilian and the whale is the Draco and all this stuff. But I ended up moving several times up there as well. And I'm at this one place, and I wake up, and there's a reptilian with a big tall cape that came up so high I couldn't see his face. I could only see his protruding forehead, and it was the same color as the other reptilians. And he started wiggling his fingers like this. So I started doing that because, I've been seeing these things come over the mountaintop, a great big tube that came down all the way over to my head, and I thought, oh, okay, I guess. But I got scared because I didn't think my body would fit in, just my soul or whatever. And I ended that by, saying no. I thought it might be interesting. How should I know? And all these things are going on, And so I start wiggling my fingers for this, who I call Mr. Fingers, priest, or I don't know what. And he glides in to right next to my bed, and he puts his fingers into my abdomen. And at first it felt good, and then I started feeling all my innards being bapped into, and it didn't feel good. And at the end of the bed, I noticed that there was a Catholic priest. And I looked up the color of his smock after that, and it was U.S. Navy. And this priest had one of those little blessing gizmos. I forget what you call them, but they dip them in holy water and they do that. And when the holy water is gone, they keep doing it. And everybody, the reptilian or Draco, whatever he was, and the priest, they're all looking at my abdomen, and all this stuff is going on. It's light outside. I can see everything. And there's kind of like a 10% or maybe 5% opaque covering to it. So I don't know if it's a hologram or some kind of projection. I just don't know. But when all of that happened, I figured I needed to get out of Costa Rica because it was not to my liking anymore. And I was headed to South America. There was a priest down in Ecuador that I wanted to go visit. And I started getting sloppy with my paperwork, and I ended up in the Panamanian immigration jail in Panama. And, of course, there, as you're seeing the news today, all these immigrants are coming up there. And, they were from Sri Lanka, from, India, China, several different, mostly Colombian. But they'd get put in there, and the people from East India would get moved right along because they were they were refugees, and the Colombians, they weren't as hip. And if you denounce your government and don't have a passport and all of that, they do the paperwork for you, and you just keep moving along. And I talked to one of these people that he had gone to New York after I had gotten back to the States, and he had gotten up there. And so that had been going on at that point. But with me, I was they were keeping me. There was somebody in the cell with me, and I'd wake up, and the whole this large room that I'm in, open room, everybody's crowded around me. And I wake up, and there's a microphone at my face, and all these people that are just watching me. And this is out of the MK Ultra into the TI. What they were doing is through sleep hypnosis, asking me questions and so on and so forth in my sleep. And I saw it several times there. And I normally, it was very rare for somebody from the United States to be in that facility. And they gave me you know, they were going to keep me. There was somebody that was my perpetrator that would come in and go out and so on and so forth. And so I ended up going to a friend of mine, and she gave me the money for an airline ticket, and that way I could leave. They weren't gonna, everybody else, you know, they put on their way. They it's in their charter that they, you know, would pay for somebody's airline ticket, but you know, with me, they were perfectly willing to let me just sit and rot and, you know, become you know, their toy, whatever. So I end up back in the United States. I end up back in Seattle, and I go to the hospital uh, because I was, you know, in a first world country, I thought, and they were. What I was trying to do is, you know, what is it with this thing in me? I felt it was a snake, and I wanted to get rid of it, and uh, you know, I mean, in my book, I go into detail on all of this. I'm just trying to give you a flying overview here, but they did a uh, uh, they did a a colonoscopy, and I came out of it with the feeling that you know, I was real dopey and everything else, and I just felt that they had been in there doing something. And then I had a a bone marrow test where they took a piece out of my tailbone, and uh, that one, a friend of mine came to pick me up, and I was 2 hours late. And I think the whole time what they were doing was chipping me on both of those operations. Gosh, if you can avoid an operation, do. Those people are not nice. Uh, and so you know, I end up I uh, I go back to San Diego, and I have a situation with my heart, and uh, I had joined the uh, Medi-Cal or Medicare, Medicaid, and they gave me a physical, and in there I said that I was, you know, weak of heart, or felt like I was weak in that department. And they gave me some tests, and they said, "Oh no, you know, through X-rays, your ascending aorta is, you know, too big." And you know, so I said, "Well, how long's that been going on? This is relatively recent that I'm experiencing this tiredness." And so I go in for open heart surgery. They crack my sternum. They do a shunt Dacron sleeve around my ascending aorta, and they do a triple bypass, and they put in a cow valve, aorta valve, because I had always had a murmur. And then I got on an airplane after I recovered, and they put me into secondary to, you know, wave the wand over me because I had metal in me. And I said, "I don't have any metal in me." And I looked on the screen, and my whole side of my chest is all lit up, you know, but they didn't put any metal in me. The doctor, that wasn't their thing, you know, Dacron, stitches, I don't know. But see if I can do this. This is takes a little bit to find it at times. That's where my operation was. I looked down and I don't have an innie anymore. My belly button is now an outie. And I mean, it's completely different. And, I get this thing on top of my head. It's a little harder to find than what I would like. I don't, I've done this once before just to, see if I could find it, but, so, they chipped my, the base of my penis as well. And, at times they will do a, technological, erection on me that I'm, just sitting there, and all of a sudden, I feel like it pulse up the shaft, and all of a sudden, that's going on, and so they just went throughout, and they chipped me all over the place, and that's so. The targeting is daily, nightly, and what they're doing is they're getting my astral and my astral body, and they, all these dreams now, they're all synthetic. I have zero natural dreams. I mean, sleep is one of those natural things that you're supposed to go home and, everything is planned out that way for the human experience. But now I'm being put into all these scenarios where, I've, they're just plays that they put me into. Some of them are training. I see Nazis. We get into gunfights, and I see them hiding, current day technology, Pepsi bottles in the hood or in the trunk of a car, because I'm seeing it, and they don't want me to remember that, from my dream, that I saw something that was today and not, 1940, whatever. And, I'm in elementary schools that are, for training, and in these dreams, these synthetic dreams, and this one, I'm walking with some guys, and I see somebody that's a perpetrator of mine, and I say, "Come on, let's go get him." And these guys are like taken unawares by what I'm experiencing, and evidently this memory, or I remembered having seen this guy being bad to me, and I chase him to his car, and I am pulling him out of his car. Evidently, I broke his arm, and he shows up in subsequent nights, false dream, where he's got a cast, and they're doing things that are just messing with my head, and they're doing things that are that I'm seeing that I'm not supposed to be seeing. But a lot of it, or a fair amount of it, has this esoteric and technology and connection. And at this point, it's it'd be nice to be able to say I thought it was all technology, but I don't. I just don't. There's plenty more. Like I said, it's all in my book, but the 2015 is when all my hospital work started, and that was during Obama, and I really didn't want to come back for Obama. I left for George W. because I didn't like his father, and I knew I wasn't going to like him. But Obama coming on, I could see it coming. I knew he was a bad one. And all the Obamacare is chipping. And I've heard that and I've read it, and there's, my experience with it.
Wow.
But yeah, like I said, it still goes on, and in the dreams, and they have everybody involved. I was at my cousin's and doing work there. I was on the computer, and people working for them would come in and out, and they'd all be stacking up these hamburger tickets, for free burgers on my desk. And then they just leave them there, and the stack just kept growing and growing, and I came to realize that they're not gifting me of all these burgers. They're being paid for their involvement in my I don't know what sort of stalking goes on, reporting where you are, reporting what you're doing, all these things. And they're, everywhere I've traveled, because I just keep, my motorhome, keep moving around, and they're just passing these things out to everybody so that they can get them involved. Everybody that's, as I listen to them at night, they are, by and large, Democrats, Bidenites, and hate Trump and hate truthers. And I keep hearing whistleblower, and used in negative terms in my V2K. I am clairaudient, so I also see things, where I'll see them, and they come close. I'm sure they're looking at me on their computer screen, but I can see them. The technology that they've got, they're able to do, look at your thoughts, listen to your thoughts, give you information, frequency to make you upset or make you scared or make you angry or all these different things. And I think they're doing that with the people that they're getting, to be my haters as well. The crowds, I think they're being messed with. They just don't know it.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you. What do you say we ask some questions and we can go back and forth? And for these, let's keep these answers. Since I have a bunch of questions, let's try to, if you can, give a couple examples or keep it short, and then we can sort of go back and forth a little bit and have some fun answering some questions that people submitted. But I mean, it just goes to show anybody's susceptible to this. There's so many different ways that they target. For Tracy, this started later in her life to her knowledge, to where you really started to understand that, you were being targeted and experiencing this. Where with Ron, I know for you, it was really since birth, you were targeted, even if it wasn't, through electronics as soon as you were born, like you were targeted from being in a family that was involved in government programs, so targeting takes so many different forms. And, the electronic element of it, the gang stalking, the V2K, these are very, very malicious and very intentional types of abuses that, you know, all walks of life can experience. So I wanted to ask both of you, and again, we can have a little bit of banter on this, but wanted to flow through some of these questions. So I think you both sort of answered this, but how did you know that you were being targeted? Let's do electronically. Like, what was the moment that whenever you guys first realized that? And how did you, I guess, end up navigating that to understand that it was electricity? So Tracy, let's go back to you. When was that for you, that when that first started for you, and when did you have that aha moment of, oh, targeted individual, that's what's going on?
Yeah, I want to say it was maybe 6 months. I want to say maybe August of 2020. So about maybe four months after. And it was, for me, it was, I'm glad you mentioned electricity, because there is a grid component to this, you know, like you can tell, like in your environment. Like for me, when I was in my hotel, I thought that it was like coming from the little refrigerator, like I was being sounds ridiculous, like I thought I was being spied on through the little refrigerator. And then it was the control, temperature control thermostat on the wall, you know. You can just tell based on the things that are happening in your environment that there's something riding the grid, and I don't know how else to but anyway, to answer your question, I had to do things like I would go to my car and get my sun visor, you know, the foil thing that you put, and I'd bring it up and lay it on top of me in the bed in the hotel. And I didn't get relief from that. Somebody shared with me to go in the bathroom and try to sleep in the bathroom with the shower on high, the hot. And then the condensation that would build up sort of canceled out whatever the energy source was. Extreme headaches, heart racing, like you literally feel the energy coming into you, paranoia, fear. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, how did you end up realizing that you were a targeted individual? When did that terminology come up? Because I'm sure that wasn't, I'm sure from what I understand, you didn't even know that that was a thing until you started researching. So how did you end up realizing that that's what was going on?
I don't know. That time was so blurry for me. Other than I think it really caught on when about 6 months out, I started to reverse engineer like the things that were going on in my life when all this started, like the hacking, when I was still in my family home and all that. And then I remembered when I went to the ER, which I believe the symptoms that I had were manufactured by the Lockheed Martin neighbor, you know, that was, I talked about in my previous interview. So when I found out the significance of the test that I was tricked into getting, the EEG, once they had my EEG, they have me. Like I'm literally their toy, you know, to mess with. But I didn't know that at the time till 6 months later. That EEG basically gives them the blueprint for me to do whatever they want remotely. And then I think that's how I backed into finding out about the targeted program. And then I found out that Lockheed Martin, the guy that befriended my husband, that he is listed on patents for DARPA and the Brain Initiative. And when I did the research on the patents that he's listed on, and I see that there's a direct correlation with the technology which is synthetic aperture LADAR, and how they use brain imaging, fMRI and EEG. I'm like, I'm done. Yeah, that's sort of how I backed into it.
Oh my gosh. Wow. And what about you, Ron? What was the moment that you realized that you were being targeted with electricity?
It was when my parents died in 1990, as I was saying, and I was sitting with my friends, and I felt the electronic leash It's the only way I can describe it, being set. And, at that time I was head of a street theater group where president where, there were like 250. We were doing, shows in movies, in parades and commercials, television commercials, all this stuff. And that pretty much ended all of that, because what happens is you start losing friends. But the tinnitus started when I came back to the United States in 2014. And but with all the experiences that I had been having, I was not able to pinpoint any particular direction for me to find out what the hell was going on. I was going to UFO conferences. I was doing all these things, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And I contacted this one woman. I think it's Melissa Leslie. That doesn't sound right, but anyway, she said, "Oh, after I told her what I was going through, you're a TI." She said, "I don't do TIs," and their call ended right then and there. And I thought, TI, what the heck is that? So I started doing all this research on what a TI was, and I see. And so I started going to TI meetings and, seeing what everybody else was going through. None of them had the same setup that I did, but thankfully. But, everybody was going through some kind of arduous torture. And yeah. And they're also using something that I believe is called a squid, and that's a electronic device that's I forget what it stands for, but it's it they use it when I fall asleep. They turn it on, and when I wake up, it's got this armature that's turning, and it's got to slow down. So I feel it being turned off, but before that, I'm all vibrating and buzzing, and that's not every night, but it's at least once a week, and sometimes it goes every night, and sometimes they turn it off before I wake up, and I just don't know. But yeah, that's and I was in Utah, and they had somebody that was come in from, I believe he said Afghanistan, where he was working with the prisoners of war there. And I heard a magnet get put on my rear bumper that was huge. And he said, I've got to, it's his subconscious that I want to do damage to. And that thing bounced me out of bed. It was so strong. And I've felt that a couple of different times as well.
Wow. Geez. Well, you both have very interesting journeys, how you stumbled on that. I feel like even for me doing this podcast, I didn't hear the words targeted individual until probably like a year and a half ago. And I've been podcasting for 3.5 years, brand new to all of this. But it seems like more and more people are talking about it. But even like 3.5 years ago, 2 years ago, I didn't really hear that terminology being passed around a ton. I might have seen it here and there, but I think it's amazing that both of you were able to kind of navigate that, because Although today, I think it's a little bit more commonplace in this community. Even just a couple years ago, I don't think it was even talked about that much in a more mainstream way, just in our community, much less being able to go online and figure out what's going on with you. And, Ron, that's really fascinating that you had somebody point that out to you for you. So you could be like, oh, what's a TI? I'm going to go look this up, So that's really fascinating. Thank you both for sharing. So the next question sort of segues from what Ron was just saying. Obviously, there's different types of targeting. There's gang stalking, V2K. People have heard these terms, I think, but might not know exactly, what does that look like for real life examples. So I know you guys have a million examples you could give of this, but if you could just give, maybe one example of a couple different types of targeting, just to give people an idea of what that's like. Like, what is gang stalking, and like how do you know if that's happening to you? What's an example of that happening to you? What is V2K, and how do you experience that? What's a directed energy weapon, and how did that impact you, and how did you know that that was happening to you? Or what's an example of being hit with one that somebody could maybe understand on the other side? And especially if they're going through it, they can say, oh, that sounds a lot like what I'm going through. Now I have the terminology for it. So let's go with you, Ron. Let's start with you, since you were just kind of talking about that. If you want to give a few examples of specific moments of targeting that you've gone through, so people can understand what some of these things are. And then Tracy, you can go next.
Okay, well, I already told you about which directed energy weapons they're using on me. The gang stalking, there'll be somebody in a grocery store that seems to be on every aisle that you're on, and they don't have anything in their basket, but they're paying a lot of attention to you. They'll be together talking about you, and like I say in my book, I've got very good examples of that. Yeah, it's a good read. Heavy, but good. Okay, so give me a short, what was the list again?
Yeah, I don't know if I know
targeting?
all of them. Yep, like what specific, for example, you name gang stalking, you name the directed energy weapons. What about, say, different types of targeting? What else have you experienced aside from those things that you've mentioned, and maybe some examples of it? Or even other examples of gang stalking, things like that.
Well, what they're doing is they're okay. So I'm down in Costa Rica. I'm at this event, and I'm feeling out of sorts, and I was for quite a while. There's this guilt cloud that's over me, and it's because of the energy that's being applied to me, both electronic and humans. Humans have tremendous amount of energetic skills that they don't know that they've got. And that's why pornography is a horrible thing. Not only what they do to the women or whoever that is in it, and how they are abused, but how it translates into abuse in the supernatural that we all live in. We feel these things that are going on. We've got a higher self, and that is affected by what we do here, and it translates out. But at this event that I was at in Costa Rica, this one gentleman took a pair of divining rods, and he held them up, and he said, okay, I need a volunteer. So somebody moved up, and he said, okay, everybody think very nice thoughts about this person. Give him a lot of love. And so that's what we all did. We all just, oh, he's good looking. He's, holds himself well. He's just, an excellent person. I wish nothing but the good for this person. And he takes these divining rods and he starts to walk toward the person. And he takes 1 or 2 steps and he's 20 feet from him. And these rods go boing. They found water, they found the energy. And he said, okay, so that's what it takes with, positive energy. He said, now everybody think bad about this person, just how horrible he is, how ugly he is, how despicable of a person that he is. And so everybody did that and just, thought and thought and thought how, terrible this. And he takes the divining rods and he walks and 2 steps, 3 steps, 20 steps. And he's finally gets within a couple feet of the guy and the rods slowly open up. And that was an exhibition of what energy is and how it affects the human psyche, or and this is what gang stalking is. And every time that there's negative energy that's being projected, and these people, they talk to your friends, they talk to your family, they tell all these lies, they get this case blown out of proportion that they all of a sudden you're the worst person this planet has ever produced. And that's what you get up and go out into the world to confront. And like I said, it's in shopping markets. It's, with me, it's not as common. With other people, it's super common.
That's terrible. And that's why this is like so hard for people to understand, because it's so covert,
Yeah.
that like even the people that you're closest to are deceived by you, and they don't even know that they're being brainwashed to not believe you. So it's like you can't even go to your best friends, like all your security just gets ripped away from you, and no resources. And Tracy, I know you have some examples too. Let's talk about some specific examples you've gone through with gang stalking, V2K, with directed energy weapons. Do you have specific examples to help people relate to what this would look like in real life?
Yeah, so for me, I thank goodness I don't get V2K, but I very much get something that attaches to my head, that I can talk about what that looks like today, later. But for gang stalking, I only dealt with that for the first 12, 13 months. And I dealt with it a lot at the airport because I was always trying to leave. But like I said, there was one particular time when I left Denver and the boots on the ground gang stalkers showed up in Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky airport. But I dealt with things like, I'd go into a restaurant, Waffle House, for example. I'll never forget one time I went into Waffle House to sit down to eat. And the lady was being real nice, real casual, whatever. Then the phone rang. She hung up. All of a sudden, dishes started flying. They spilled orange juice on my lap. They're like, "Can I take your order?" Oh, and then they, bring food. Okay, like doing things to invoke anxiety. That's a lot about what the gang stalking is for. Is to, you hear about a lot of people. They have a trigger, like a trigger color, where every time they go out of their house, they are inundated with people and with red shirts on. Because the color of red invokes fear and trauma or whatever. I didn't deal with that, but my trigger item was a Dodge Charger, black Dodge Charger, because the law enforcement, the big majority of the county law enforcement for the county that I was exposing, they drive black Dodge Chargers. And so the whole thing was, my targeting kicked off with me being followed by a black Dodge Charger everywhere I went, to instill fear in me, with Texas plates, mind you. And I was in Colorado, and that case was in Texas, you know what I mean? So that's the kind of stuff they do. I had one time 5 cars try to run me off the road. I was driving from Denver to Boulder, and I had 5 cars trying to run me off the road. There was one time when I was followed from the Denver airport to a local hotel, and I was too afraid to get in my car and drive, so I took a shuttle from the airport to the closest hotel, and got into my room. And no sooner did I check into my room, I felt like I was being followed. I looked out my window, I'm sorry, the peephole on the door, and I saw a guy being escorted by 2 people in blue uniforms, same people I just seen at the Denver airport, escorted this guy into the hotel room next to mine. And he had like what you see bug exterminators wear on their back when they come and they spray your house. Well, this guy had one of those on his back. He went into the hotel room next to mine, made it sound like he was turning on this spray in the bathroom adjacent to mine. And then the guy comes out escorted by these 2 people in blue uniforms and takes him out the door. Well, I went downstairs to check out. The guy was completely covered in tattoos from the tip of his head to the bottom, of his toes, including the white of his eyes. One time, I think I said that that the guys pretending to be, CIA or whatever at the airport one day, or showing up in a different airport or hotel the next day. Cameras, always putting cameras on you, like standing in the airport waiting through security, and there's somebody holding a phone, like this directly. And again, to your point a moment ago, it's so subtle that if you draw attention to it, or if you say, why are you following me? You were just in Louisville, an hour ago. Now, why are you here at the Denver airport? You're made to look crazy if you call any of that out.
Yes.
Another thing that stands out is there's a big Arlington is the town adjacent to where that one case was, and there was a lot of speculation that somebody tied to the fire department out of that town was involved in this case. And one of my gang stalkers shows up in the hotel with an Arlington Fire Department, t-shirt on, that kind of thing. And then, the energy, I believe is there. They go hand in hand. I believe that the targeting, boots on the ground, targeting stuff, and then blasting the target with these energies is absolutely intentional, obviously. And I believe, I'm one of those people where I always want to know, well, what do they have to gain, from this? There's got to be something that they're gaining by doing this. And yeah, we can talk about that later. I have a lot of theories on that, but I don't think it's just, because for me, I had that intense targeting for 12 to 15 months, but then it continued to evolve for a couple years after that. And it just looked a lot different. It wasn't gang stalking. It was more the energy / technology stuff that I dealt with, that detox took care of.
So let's go into that, Tracy, since you just brought that up. That is a really good question to sort of tie in the why of this. So I'll have you answer first, Tracy, just because you brought it up, and then Ron, you obviously have a lot of insight on this too. I'd love to hear a couple, whatever insights you guys have, some short answers on why. Like, what do they have to gain from this? Why would they choose, and maybe even why did they choose you? Why do you think that they chose you? What do they have to gain? What are some of your theories on this?
Start with me or Ron? Sorry.
Let's start with you, since you had brought that up. Let's go and let's just go ahead and do that, and then Ron, you can go right after.
Yeah, for me, so I was always led to believe that it was because of my victim advocacy, because I was so obnoxious, in my delivery, my approach, the power, the people, the positions of power that these people, I was reckless. And so I was always led to believe it was in response to that. But I keep mentioning, there were 2 guys that befriended my husband in the months leading up to this. And one of those guys came into my husband's life before any of those cases ever surfaced. that guy is tied to chemical biological engineering. His name is tied to the biological and chemical engineering department of CU Boulder. They call him Team Weimer. His dad is over biological chemical engineering CU Boulder, and he founded ALD Nano Solutions, which is a nanotech company used for biomedical applications. Okay, now here's the kicker, even the biggest thing. He works in the energy. That's what he does, energy. And so when you know those things, and then so that's the first guy who came into my husband's life before a case ever came up. And then the second guy, which is the Lockheed Martin, they were buddies. So it was the three of them, my husband and these two guys, knowing that they're tied to research in the very same things that was used to cause me harm. I wonder, did it have to do with the case? And if not, the why, I mean, I don't know. Is it experimentation for where things are headed? I mean, I know we saw a spike in TIs post-COVID, right? And with all of the, it's no longer speculation, right? But the research that has come forward about the things that's in the technology that they're, exposing people to through, the vax. I don't know. Is there more? Is it part of some experimentation as a precursor to what's to come with human? I don't know. I just know that these guys are involved with black ops, technology that that I don't know, Emma. I think, you think on one hand, there's this, changing humanity to be part of the, what they're doing, pumping us up with technology that makes us interact with smart cities and, all that whole theme. But then there's the Depop theme, and I always wonder is if the targeted program, if we could, collect some data to find some commonalities across TIs, would we have like a large population in a certain age range, certain demographics, whatever, that would make sense for some, like Depop thing. Let's hit them with a bunch of frequencies, make them, bog them down with a bunch of trauma, inflict stress. It's the perfect storm for the parasite whole thing, and then the frequencies to activate disease and all that good stuff, which I just remembered Ron had mentioned something about history and historically how pandemics in the past have been, I don't want to misquote what he said, but have been triggered by a magnetic
technological advances.
Yeah, technological advances. It makes me wonder if that's a big part of what's going on here, that it's hidden and we're not, that's why data for the vax isn't going to be available for 50 years, because there's something bigger maybe going on because let me say this too, that a big part of my journey, I think reason why my perspective continued to evolve and get healthier as time went on is because I was dabbling in multiple forums that many of which didn't have anything to do with targeted, but they were dealing with the same symptoms that I was having, but they were calling it something different. You know what I mean? Like the Spooky 2, the Rife healing that I do, I'll be in it's called Spooky 2 Rife machine, and I'll go into a Facebook group of people all over the globe that are looking for Rife healing, and because they're dealing with the ringing in the ears or the same symptoms that I'm detoxing from. And some are calling it chemical sensitivity, some are calling it electromagnetic frequency sensitivity, some are calling it gadolinium poisoning, which is it's the chemical that we're injected with when we go to the hospital for imaging with contrast. They inject you with, it's gadolinium, and there's a lot of people that that are suffering, you know, from that exposure. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling.
These are really good theories. It's a good question to ask because nobody really knows. And you guys have really both been on the forefront. You both like research arduously, you know, research. Ron, I know you have some interesting insights on this too. So I think for you, Ron, like we kind of know why you were chosen to be targeted because you grew up targeted. You were in MK Ultra. You know, you've essentially were indoctrinated into, you know, a lifelong journey of targeting from birth in a sense. But I wanted to ask you to piggyback off of what Tracy's talking about. What do they have to gain from somebody like you or MK Ultra survivors being targeted? Why would they do that after they've already experimented on you? You know, what's the benefit to them after you're out of the program to keep experimenting on you? So a short answer on that. And then also going off of, you know, the question of what are essentially the types of targeting in a sense, or like why are they doing this? What is their like end goal for all of these types of targeting? What's the big picture? So what's the benefit of targeting you, and then what's the big picture? Why are they doing this? What's the end goal?
Well, you know, they are being paid. You know, they've got financial gain, and you know, these handlers would not stay with somebody unless there was reason. And it's, you know, your neighbors, your family members, your friends that do turn against you, they're put into a sense of distrust and dislike. But the handler is, you know, an employee. I've found that the CIA is the top, the FBI is second, and the FBI uses citizen informants, the CIs, and they'll get those people out of jail, and they'll, you know, they don't really have to pay those people. They've got something on them, and they can keep them in abeyance to do their bidding, and that all takes place there. But there's also, you know, I look at it like we're the canaries in the coal mine, and it's rather rude of me to say because that means that everybody's going to be going through this, and you know that, and you know, if you see a canary fall over dead, you leave the room. But what they're learning is what we do when we are tortured thusly. Do we run? Do we fight? Do we, you know, and how can all of this be applied to the masses? There is a continuance of the program, and more people, you know, whether it's Stockholm syndrome or what do they call the one that happened in Cuba, or you know, that they're you know, in Medford, Oregon, they did some test where they put a frequency into the air, and they had a spike in suicides. You know, and they did spraying over San Francisco at one point, and you know, they're just trying these different ways of you know, handling humans. You know, and anybody that's familiar with the World Economic Forum and you know, all the bodies of its ilk are know for certain that those people don't have us individuals as their what they're trying to protect or do better for. They're this jab that they've done. I recently was did a live blood analysis with Dr. Anna Mihalcha in here in Washington, and I've got I didn't get the jab. I did get the PCR. The PCR is getting the DNA so that they can keep a file on it, and the jab is putting in microbots. And in my live blood analysis, I saw these microbots, and if you've heard much about that, they also talk about the plastic polyformations that happen in people's blood. And this is being brought to the light by morticians. And the methylene blue helps cut down the formation of this plastic. And the EDTA chelation therapy, it's an intravenous dose that they put into your system, and you can't even get that in California, I know, but I don't know where else. But here in Washington, we've been doing that, and so I saw these little micro dots, and they're different colored lights, and they're traveling in my blood. And so we've got the airplanes dropping all the geoengineering on us that's in our food and our water and our trees and our animals and everything. And then we've got this jab that 3/4 of the planet got injected with, that they're shedding it through their steam vapor in their breath and so on, that's getting everybody else. And these little dots are they're forming different things within the blood. They've got technology in them, and so but there's this thing that the Pentagon has been doing for some time now, and it's called the Salient World Simulation, the SWS. And in that, they're setting it up so that they have digital control of every human on the planet. And I don't doubt that they're also doing the different species, dogs, cats, and lions and tigers, so on. But they're, we're at the top of their food chain, and they're assigning, and that's what's been going on in my astral dreams, and the plots and the everything that they're doing with me is feeding this supercomputer with all this information about what to do with the masses, how do they react. And Stacy, I'm so happy that you've been able to get Tracy. I mean, I'm so happy that you're able to get away from this, because you've run your course for them. You're no longer a bad person to them. And me, I'm just so far in that they're once MK Ultra, always MK Ultra, and they're never going to let me go. And but they are on this schedule to get everything rolled out And the next couple of years are just going to be a lot of challenges. So that's pretty much what I was thinking.
Great answers, you guys. Very aligned, even though you guys didn't talk about this prior. The big picture seems to be kind of clear that there's just an overall global agenda that they're, using experimental subjects for in order to unleash on a global level underneath our noses, and it's disguised as this, we're coming to rescue you, agenda with how you were both talking about different things being put into our bodies. And how, everything else around us interacts with that, from our food to the air to our stress levels to everything. Like Tracy said, it's really a perfect storm for a very unhealthy population in the future. And even right now, we're seeing health decline and health problems out the freaking window, especially in America, depression levels, heart disease, diabetes, obesity. Like, we're really getting into a really dangerous spot, especially in a country that's supposed to have, the best medical interventions. It's like we've really lost touch with how to heal ourselves, and we're just pouring all this money and time into authorities telling us what to put in our body, why to put into our body, how often, and we're not asking questions about it. We're just robotically doing it, which is really scary because we're not saying, what's the implications of this long term, not just for me, but for everybody participating in it. So it is really important that we at least consider that an option. I know none of us has the exact answer, but there seems to be, regardless of, what a person has gone through, it seems like the overarching agenda is pretty much synonymous with almost everybody that I talk to, that there's a bigger agenda happening at play. And there's experimental subjects being used right now for it. So I really appreciate you guys sharing that. And to sort of piggyback off that, speaking of health, obviously a big part of this is the health issues that are experienced from things like electricity, from not getting sleep, from having potentially things injected into you, or having black goo, like you were talking about, Tracy. I'd love for both of you to talk about these health issues that you've personally experienced, whether it's tinnitus. I know Ron talked about that, and what that experience is like for you, and some of the physical, mental, emotional ways that this has taken a toll on your body. So Tracy, let's go back to you. If you want to start this one and talk a little bit about how this impacted you from a health perspective. And obviously later we'll talk about how to sort of maybe reverse engineer some of that and some prevention. But let's talk about some of the ways that it can and has impacted people, and you specifically, negatively.
Yeah. So, for me, my targeting had evolved over time, right? So it started out in 2019 as the hacking and computer stuff, and then it evolved into gang-stalking, and then the tinnitus, which was from what I called direct energy at the time. And then, I had, things sparking and hitting my laptop, and I would, everywhere I went, I was causing power outages. I'd walk into an Airbnb to stay the night, and the whole power would go off. We'd have to, go out to the breaker box and flip, everywhere I went. I went to 18 different cities and states across the country, and my experiences in that regard were consistent. I also dealt with a lot of, in addition to the directed energy or whatever, I also had episodes at the onset of my targeting, of passing out. I had 6 episodes where I had no explanation for why. I just nodded and passed out twice while I was driving my car. But also, as I continued to get better, in May 2021 is when I started to detox, and then started to get really serious about it in September of 2021. And then February of 2022, I got my Rife machine, and then I got really serious about it. And I detoxed for the better part of 2 years. But as I got further along into that process, it became very, very apparent to me that I was also dealing with something demonic. And I say that because of tangible results, excuse me, tangible results of going through deliverance, also in parallel with my detox, where I'm fasting and I'm, doing things with, colon therapy and infrared therapy and Rife therapy and diet, and supplements and all of that. I'm also having people, praying over me, bride ministries and, whatever. And I ended up having like tangible results in my living space that shows that I'm getting not just toxins and parasites and heavy metals, but dark spirits are leaving my body. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not always the best at being.
Oh, you're good. No, that was awesome. Was there any other like health issues, or did you have things pop up on your skin or brain fog? Like, was there any other symptoms health-wise
Yeah.
that you got from targeting?
So the very first black goo incident was, I was in Chicago, and that was in May of 2021. But then I moved to Arkansas and continued with the hot baths and the infrared sauna. And I didn't have black goo residue left in the tub, but after I would get out of a super long, hour-long hot soak in the tub, the next morning I would see like a black sticky substance that would settle on the counter in the bathroom, the back of my toilet. So that went on for quite a few months. But then I would say detoxing, my symptoms got worse before they got better. When I say worse, I mean my head. Oh my gosh. I mean, there were times where it got really, really dark, where, I thought I was losing my mind. I thought, I was, and this was after I'd already started working, and I was functioning in my job, but I had to go get in the bathtub twice a day to bring my conductivity down in my body. Because I became so conductive, that the only way I could make it through my day was, thank God I worked from home, was to go submerge myself in the bathtub twice a day so I could go back and work. But it just got worse before it got better. And then there were layers upon layers upon layers. I say that because, I encourage people, it takes TIs, the detox journey and process takes a long time. It doesn't happen over a week or a month or even 6, and in many ways it's a lifestyle change. But, does that help? I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing, Tracy. And what about you, Ron? You had mentioned tinnitus. What ways has this impacted you negatively with your health, whether it's emotional, spiritual, physical? How has this made an impact on you?
Well, I do believe that detoxing is super important. And again, we're the canaries in the coal mine, and the rest of you people out there should take heed. And that is in your psyche as well as in your thinking, your body, your your spiritual inner life, your just who you present to the world. You are on, we are on a hot griddle, but everything is being recorded, everything is being, and they manipulate. They do quite a bit of that, actually. But yeah, when I was in Costa Rica, and I did not have tinnitus, I did have the V2K, but I also had eyeballs. I would see eyeballs, and it started before that in Washington State, and during a psychedelic trip of mine, I closed my eyes and I saw an eyeball, and I thought, well, golly gee willikers, what is that? So I assigned the higher self or even God to it. And then I'm down in Costa Rica, and it wasn't as um, it was an image that I saw in Washington, but it wasn't a full-on, human eyeball. It was just an image of one. And in Costa Rica, I was seeing eyeballs. And, one time I went to embrace a woman I knew, and all of a sudden there was like 9 of these things all clustered together. And when I left there and I came to the United States, what I saw was that the eyeballs had been replaced with spots, and these spots are technology. They're either black or white, and they're when I close my eyes to go to sleep, they appear, and they only last for like 3 or 5 seconds, and they turn off. My tinnitus gets louder when I am thinking something that they want to listen to. And I'm not sure the technology that's behind that. I think that there's both AI and physical people that are involved in my situation. One time I got onto a bus, and there was it was in Seattle, and then it was below the ground that I got on the thing, and when I'm there, I saw these 2 men talking, 2 Natalie dressed black men and with black hats, and as they were looking at me talking, one of them separated off and went over and said something to the policeman that was standing around there in the underground facility, and he left, and the guy came back with his friend, and then we all get on the bus, and I go to sit down in the seat, and lo and behold, these 2 guys are sitting right there, in the chairs, seats right next to mine, and I fell asleep. I wasn't tired, but I fell asleep. And when I awoke, there was a flash of spray that went over my face, and it was real refreshing. It was summer, it was hot, and the 2 black guys were gone, and across from me was this woman that was appealing to me, and I was going to say hello to her or something like that. I had I looked out the window, and I saw a sign that was for a bus, the connecting bus that I needed. And I looked over at this woman, and she was like in a daze, like a drugged daze. And she wasn't sitting there before. I don't know how these things transpire, but she gets up and goes out, and, I just sat in my seat and said, I'll get the next connecting bus, because I don't, there's something goofy with this. And I actually think that these guys were trying to put us together for whatever reason. I think that's it.
Wow. That's another part of it too. The stress of not being able to trust anybody. That's a really stressful feeling, having to look at everything that you thought was normal in your past and question it. And then also everybody that you meet in the future, wondering if it's a setup, wondering if they're sending people to derail you or to, sabotage you somehow, or to get some type of blackmail on you, or who knows, right? To plant stuff. Like, it's really sad and scary, all these different ways and methods that they really put you in a corner and don't give you any wiggle room to breathe. You know, you have to just be on alert all the time, be hyper vigilant, be always discerning, you know, and that's a really stressful way to live. So I appreciate you both sharing both of these. Are you both okay on time to do 2 more questions?
I'm good.
Okay. So the next question that I wanted to ask, we just went over some health issues. I'd love to talk a little bit about remedies, treatment protocols, prevention, coping mechanisms, and ways that you guys have personally found to get relief from the symptomology that you guys talk about. Because obviously it's important to know what to expect and to be able to identify different things that could happen if you're a TI health-wise. But also, you know, you both are so big with talking about solutions and talking about, you know, treatment. And I know that there's not one treatment option. I know not everything works for everybody, but you two have tried a lot. You guys have researched a lot. So I'd love to hear your perspectives. And Tracy, I know you are essentially, you know, you're in a really good place now where, you know, knock on wood, you could potentially be free from this and you're not really experiencing the health issues and things like that, but it wasn't an easy road for you. So let's talk about some treatment protocols and what worked, what didn't, and some different, maybe just some tips that we can give people on where to start. And I know something like a detox, that might be really hard to explain. So if you want to just sort of breeze over what that looks like, I know you on your blog, Tracy, and I'll have that linked. You go really in depth on some of these detoxes that you've done. I even think Alexia, who has been on my channel, she's great. She offers parasite detoxes. So there's definitely some helpful stuff that you guys can like dig really deep into. But let's go ahead and dive into this topic, because I think treatment, prevention, ways that people can defend themselves against this potentially is probably the most important thing. You know, that gets somebody clear of being able to then navigate their life and try to work around this or cope with it. And you both have done a really great job of being able to navigate this. So let's go back to you, Tracy, and let's start talking about the healing process of this potentially.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really important, an important thing to point out is, you know, a lot of TIs don't have housing, don't have steady housing. And me obtaining that was, I'm just so blessed and so grateful. First, I secured stable housing where I felt safe, and I didn't feel that anybody was related to the targeting. So that allowed me to calm myself down. And then, and I know that's hard for a lot of TIs, but I feel like if we can't calm we have to be, what our central nervous system is like overloaded with all the trauma. But if we can get to secure housing and calm ourselves down, and then our mind, you know, I have such a heart and so much empathy for so many TIs, and I was plugged into quite a few of them, but I had to disconnect from the community to long enough to get strong again. And now that I'm stronger, I'm reconnecting and trying to help others. But I needed to get my central nervous system strong and stable, but then my mind strong. And the only way I could do that is by not focusing on the problem, not focusing on the enemy and the circumstances and everything that was supposed to happen to me, but redirect my mind to the healer and healing and getting better. And at the end of the day, if it's people doing it, or if it's technology or whatever, it all maps back to evil. At the end of the day, you can keep going back and you're going to get to evil at the end. And so I don't want to focus that anymore. So central nervous system, then your mind, but then, you know, just the detox, you got to sweat, you got to get rid of an accumulation of years of garbage that we were told is good for us or not harm. You know, we need to clean all of that out and then replace it with the good. And not just food and supplements and diet intake, but, you know, anything and everything that we are consuming, whether it be diet or what we're listening to or who we're associating with or what we're reading and, you know, what we're filling our mind with. We've got to stay in the light, because at the end of the day, you know, again, mapping back to the evil and the psychopaths that are driving this agenda, we're never going to be able to wrap our heads around that, right? And so, but what we can do is focus on, we can't change the direction that they're taking humanity. But what we can do is change and impact ourselves and try to be the best version of ourselves in spite of the evil happening around us, if that makes sense. And yeah, so
Yes. And you mentioned like the Rife technologies. What all have you used besides the detox? What else have you found? And you mentioned taking the thing out of your car, the foil wrap that goes in the window. What types of things have you physically used that were good for whether it was prevention or, you know, your healing?
yeah, I would say the key, whatever you need to do to sweat, and sweat a lot. So sweating. I had a liver surgery and my gallbladder removed. So that's like a double whammy for my body's ability to fight off the chemical toxicity. But I lost my train of thought. There are supplements that people can take that I learned from Lexi that I have on my website. If you don't have a gallbladder, ox bile is something that I took. But this Rife machine, I'm trying to share it.
Oh,
This
what is Rife?
so Rifing. So this is the generator. This is the Spooky 2 generator. And then my DNA is in this box that's hooked up to the generator. And so I got this in February of 2022, and I just set it and forget it. So it's constantly detoxing heavy metals and parasites and any other program I want to run on it. But that's like running in the background while I'm doing infrared or, doing whatever I need to do to sweat, or fasting, drinking tons of, you know what I mean? Like Rife therapy. They also have a 385-day Morgellons protocol that treat, because a lot of same symptoms of Morgellons are, a lot of TIs have Morgellons or experience symptoms tied to Morgellons. So anyway, I started that protocol a week ago, and I'm just going to let that. Sorry, my cat is distracting in the background.
Just tumbling around. That's adorable.
So anyway, and then another thing, I'll just say this one more thing, the David Case CD. So this is another incredible, Ron, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but
Recording.
yeah. So I'll just share what I think has got me to this place I'm at right now in Atlanta real quickly. So I've been in Atlanta for 5 weeks. And prior to that, the holidays, I backslid on my diet and, and things like that. And so at the beginning of the year, my symptoms were just skyrocket. And so I, about, I don't know, the 5th or 6th of January, I pulled this David Case CD out again.
And what is
And,
that? You just do a little synopsis for people who have never heard of that.
So it's I think the website is, I'll get it for you in a second. I think it's V2K tinnitus or anti-V2K. Anyway, David Case created a sound profile that he can put on an SD card, and you can put it in an MP3 player, and it lasts for an hour, and then it just keeps replaying and replaying. And what it is it's to the untrained, you would think it's just static, but it continues to cycle and sound different over the course of an hour, and it continues to repeat. Well, he recommends that you listen to it for 6 hours a night while you're sleeping for 21 days. And then it has healed a lot of people of V2K and tinnitus and things like that. I did it. I slept with it for 6 hours for 21 days. And on day 22, my symptoms came back. That was about 10 months ago. But what I have used this for that has literally saved me is, again, when my symptoms were at their peak, I couldn't focus on my work. I plug this in and I work, and it seems to disconnect from whatever it is that's connecting to it. It sounds crazy, but I can feel it connecting to my head. Okay. Well, this stops it. This does not allow it to happen. So what I did was, around the 5th day of January, I put on a sports bra, plop this thing in my sports bra, and then just put these in, and I kept them in my ears 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constantly and then I got to Atlanta, to my mom's, which she's so from Little Rock to Atlanta, about an 8 hour drive. And I got here, and I was here for 3 days without this. And I'm sorry, I did continue to wear this. I continued to wear this while I was here 24/7. The first time I took it out of my ears to get in the shower and I got out, that whatever it is tried to connect with me again. So I plopped this thing back in and can continue to listen to it 24/7. Well, now I haven't listened to this for 2 weeks, and I've been completely free. That whatever it is has not connected to me. And I don't know if it's because I changed it up, and I went against what David Case recommends, which is 6 hours a night for 21 days. And I used it during my waking hours when I needed to focus and concentrate. And that has seemed to work. And when I say connecting to my head, what I've been dealing with for the better part of 3 years now seems very systemic and methodical, to where it's like 4 days on, 3 days off. It'll come, it'll go, and it feels like best way to describe it is it feels like I jumped into the deep end of a pool too fast, and you get that pressure in your head, and it's like boom. Well, then a few hours later, it feels, and people will be like, well, what does demonic feel like? It feels demonic, and it sticks with me for 4 days, and then it goes away, and I'll have 3 days of complete freedom, just doing whatever, and then here it comes. Well, this has, I think, I'm knocking on wood, I think I could be free from it. I don't know. We'll
Wow.
see.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Ron, what about you? What are some treatment, prevention, coping, all the things to get better? What tips do you have for people on what's worked for you?
One of them is non-GMO food. What we're doing is we're poisoning. We're not doing it. They are doing it. Poisoning our systems. And, everything that you put in there, messes with your alkalinity and your acid and, your health of your organs. I've got kidney issues, and a friend of mine said, using Chinese medicine, if you make a broth out of adzuki beans, you boil it from 2 cups down to ½ cup and throw out the beans and drink the broth. And what it does is it cleanses your kidneys. And I was having issues, and sure enough, it got to the point where it was hard for me to get in or out of bed. And using this to cleanse myself, the swelling has gone down on my kidneys, because, you can turn around and reach back there and feel them. And that's when they're swollen, you can definitely tell. But, whether that was attributed to any of this stuff, I've got to throw it all in there. Tracy, it sounds like the case sound tape has had the most impactful result for you over the Rife. And
No. The Rife and all the detoxing and everything I did, I don't think this David Case CD, if I hadn't have done that, this wouldn't have worked. I feel like this was the final, like
the icing
Right.
on the top, or like the cherry on the
yeah,
top?
yeah,
for sure.
I as well detoxed. Like I said before, I was addicted to marijuana, and that was big, as well as alcohol. And this is the MK Ultra hangover that I had stayed with getting out of my mind, and but not doing that is huge, and cleansing yourself, whether it's parasites or whatever you're flushing, you're cleansing your organs, getting as clean and healthy and eating properly is huge. I have not tried. I did try a rife, but it was only 2 times, and it was brief and nothing that I could. How much did that cost, Tracy?
You can get the minimum setup for like 150.
Is that so?
Yeah, and I'll send you a link to what I would recommend, just minimal, and you can build on it from there.
Right. Okay.
And I can link that in the show notes too if you want.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've helped. I continue to meet with TIs regularly, that stumble on Emma's channel or somewhere else. And I help people get set up on Spooky. Like I helped a guy in Vietnam last Saturday get set up, and he's so far getting results. So I'd be happy to help you with it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And that is something that I've wanted to keep going with or get involved with. I got this because
what is that, Ron, for people who have
never that's the megaphone.
Okay.
And the Len Bear, the guy on targeted justice, is where I saw it. And he also says that you should get one of these, I forget what type of pen it was, some electronic pen that you find the spot and you pinpoint it. And what they do is, because targeted justice is trying to take all this to court, and they take the readings and the sound that it makes, and they can determine what type of chip that has been put into you. Now, on my heart rebuild, I've got the serial number and part number of the cow valve that aortic valve that they put in me. And with these devices here, you can figure out the pieces that they're inserting under your skin, and then it's going to feed up into what the court cases that they're dealing with. I've got a problem with the way things are running in the United States right now. It seems like every time I try to address something, I'm put on a different list. And, if I put my name on I actually think my targeting started when I was working at Microsoft, and I was given a questionnaire that included, how do they treat their workforce. And I mentioned that they were not as helpful with contract workers, which I was, as they were with their other people, the bennies and all of this, and then it created an atmosphere that was not altogether pleasing. And I think that some of my targeting started because of that comment, me getting put on to another list. So I'm not going to get a hold of targeted justice and tell them what my reading numbers are, because I don't want to be put onto the list of people that are going up against the government that's doing the targeting. I'm on enough lists as it is right now. I don't need more of those. But detoxing by purifying, what I put into my body, and no intoxicants, and the mind is, it's so important to have a pleasant disposition, even though it gets difficult. I have seen people broken to the point of suicide, and I understand, because it is very trying. But it's incumbent upon us to put our best foot forward regardless. That's our our inner work, our spiritual guidance that's going to pull us through, because we can't give up. But they've got all these suicide programs and everything that they're projecting, and you just got to put that out. Don't even go there, and don't fall into it. There's so many people that are badly affected by this. They're I can be real happy one day, and the next day it's so intense that it's not that easy. But you just got to keep going, and you got to keep being as good to yourself and others as you possibly can.
Great answers. And that sort of goes into the last question that I have today. And we'll have to do another one of these, because I think there's going to be way more questions. And there's even questions that we didn't get to today. But we covered a lot of stuff today. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys is, on the note of giving hope to people and staying positive, it can be really hard for people to, you guys both talked yourselves about how many people, finances, homes, like you really lose everything when you try to come out and talk about this to people, and I think that's one of the things that survivors or victims that are targeted individuals suffer with the most, is that isolation that Tracy was talking about earlier. It's those really horrible, tinnitus, like what Ron was talking about, just these constant symptoms and isolation and fear, trauma, trying to just get by to the next moment, knowing that something else is going to roll down the hill and try to plow you over, like being in a video game, playing Mario Kart, and there's all this stuff flying in the road, and you get through one, you wipe the sweat off, and oh my gosh, there's another thing, it's like, where do you get time to breathe? So for people who are going through this, who are suffering immeasurably, who maybe have family members or friends that they want to confide in, but it's really scary for them, what's some advice that you guys can give to people going through this, whether it's how to talk to family and friends, whether it's how to get to that place where you can look at things positively? What are some things that people can do to bring hope back into their life? And let's go with Ron, since we were just sort of talking about that at the end of your conversation.
Well, I think your inner life is super important. When we're done here, good Lord willing, and the river don't rise, we will go with our soul intact. And if we are indeed at peace with ourselves and with humanity in general, it's super important that we go that way, that we're not in fear, that we're not in anger and everything that comes with that. And that translates to being that way daily. I've got a problem of over-analyzing things, and you gotta let go and just, like pray. Praying helps me a lot because it gets me out of that mindset of, oh, woe is me, or, this person did that, or that person did that, and puts me into a place of complacency where I feel, like I'm speaking upward and addressing things that are more important than the day-to-day BS that we go through as a TI. Does that answer?
Yeah, that's a really great answer. And what would you say, Ron, if you were to just give somebody advice on maybe how to approach, say, a loved one or a friend to tell this information to them? And maybe you don't have an answer and maybe it didn't work for you, but if you could go back in time maybe and redo it, knowing everything that you do now, how would you recommend that somebody have that conversation and not be called crazy?
Well, because one thing that I have experienced is when I tell somebody about what I'm going through, then they get approached by my handler, who then turns them against me. So what you're asking is a very precarious situation.
Yes.
What I would recommend is, those that are closest to you, that you meter your conversations about it. I'm not one that's big on suffering in silence, but people such as yourself, Emma, and Tracy, and other people that I know that are either MK Ultra or TI, they understand. And waking up people that are so far asleep, I mean, in a deep, deep sleep, I caution that. It's so difficult. They're and this is the biggest problem in that I call us canaries in a coal mine, because other people don't know that they are being subjected to this mind control. They're watching television. They got the TV on 24/7. And all it's doing is subliminal messaging everything that, here we are talking about the effects of, and everybody is, they're, whether it's the jab or what, they just, they're willing to take anything in that television tells them to do. And it's such a mind-boggling thing for me. And that I think is my biggest thing, is turn your TV off. Just turn it off.
Turn it off, break it. Yeah.
Break it. Take it out back and shoot it. God.
Savage Ron coming on now.
Don't get me started.
Tracy, what about you? How would you go back in time and talk to people, or what words of advice can you give to people to sort of maybe get motivation, or, just keep going throughout the day?
Yeah, for me, I had to force myself to think positive thoughts, because there is I don't know, Ron, if you've experienced this, but with the AI and the technology, there is a thought loop thing that we can get. Yeah. And you intentionally get sucked into that negative thought loop. And it's like, you know that you're doing it. You're like, but it's just, anyway, you have to make a conscious decision to literally snap away from it. As soon as that you find yourself going there, you have to, nope, redirect it to the positive. And at repetition, you keep doing that over and over and over and over, you eventually override that, the negative. And so there's that. But then as far as with explaining things to loved ones, that's the most devastating. It's all devastating. But anyway, what I had to do was, for example, my brother, I would have liked for my brother to have stepped up and been there for me. He knows when I was literally getting attacked on the street in Colorado and he was in Atlanta. And if it were him that was going through that, I would have been on a plane and been right there. And why he didn't get on a plane and come. But I had to reach a place in my mind where our loved ones will never, ever understand this, ever. And you know what? They don't have to. And in fact, the healthier I got, and the more I realized that I needed to extend grace in their situations, because why would we want to ask our loved ones to grasp this level of evil, if they don't have to? Even my mom, and to your point, Ron, it drives me nuts that my mom sits all day long in front of the TV all day and gets mad because I don't join her. But at the end of the day, my mom doesn't need to know what's come. She's 77, right? So she doesn't need to know what's coming in future generations. So I had to get to a place where I pick my battles. What's more important to me, to share and do life with my mom for however long, God keeps her here, or continue to butt heads or even go silent on each other because she can't grasp the level of evil I just walked out of. So, I think that I do think that and so I had to forgive her, and my brother, forgive them, for they don't understand. They don't know what, they just don't. So there's that. But then I also know that a lot of TIs, and I know it is true in many cases that family members do turn, but I think a lot of TIs conclude that their family members could be involved in their targeting because of that tug of war that goes on with them trying to explain, and then the family member doesn't know how to respond to it, and then it's interpreted, and their response is interpreted in a way that it wasn't intended. And I think we get in that,
taking everything personally.
Yeah. And then, I also needed to realize too, that there's that whole Ephesians 6, where we're not, battling with people. That I also believe that there's some truth to the demonic, the spiritual realm, interacting with those interactions between TIs and their family members. That, the demonic gets all up in their business, and then, before they know it, what they wanted to be a productive conversation ended up going belly up, and they don't talk, and I'm speaking for myself, and we wouldn't talk for 6 months. So just learning that they aren't always, they're not going to be able to grasp the big picture and extend grace and forgiveness for the sake of maintaining the relationship. And that's how we conquer isolation, being isolated, and all of that. And it's not fair. The TIs be like, well, why should I have to eat crud, or why should I have to, extend grace? Why is it? But I don't know. I found the more
like, now there are TIs talking. We have social media, and there's communities forming. You two exchanged emails randomly before, I got to talk to you, Ron. And, there's different ways that TIs are coming out and saying, hey, I'm alone. I can't go to my family. I can't go to my friends, or they've abandoned me when I did go to them. So I'm going to look for like-minded people, And so I think that too is a really good outlet for not feeling alone, is literally not being alone and connecting with people who are going through something similar. So A, it validates that you're not crazy. B, you have people around you that understand. And C, like what Tracy was saying, you're not necessarily dumping all of this onto people who might not believe you anyways. you can maybe, let them know your symptoms. Hey, I'm getting tinnitus, and they can be a part of your healing journey in that way, and hopefully have grace for physical symptoms, or if you're not able to go to family functions and things like that. But I think there's a really beautiful community forming between the survivor community, the TI community. It's all one and the same, but more and more people now are realizing that there's not a lot of people in the real world that you can go to, but there's a lot of people going through what they are that are more than happy to connect, and who want that company and who want that dialogue to be in their lives. They want somebody to talk to about it. So I love that we're able to, bring that together, and that, you two especially are so accessible. I'm sure you guys get people all the time that reach out to you and are grateful for your work. And I wanted to see, before we sort of start closing down for today, did you guys have any closing words that you wanted to add about anything?
I'm thankful that this is going on. I believe that our charter here on the planet Earth, in this incarnation, is one of karma, and we're able to really get down to our basic self and what that means. Those that are blissfully ignorant in their TV fog are, and I've heard it said, as long as you have something that keeps you held, then you'll never question what's going on. Whether it's religion or family or drugs or, whatever. And so, yeah, this is an opportunity as much as it is extreme drudgery.
The duality of it. That's a beautiful thought, Ron. Did you have
Yeah.
anything, Tracy, that you wanted to say? I know you already said a lot, but if there's anything you didn't get to say, I wanted to give you an opportunity.
Yeah, not really. I'm sort of looking at my notes, and I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of it.
Do you want to share, both of you, where people can support you? Tracy, if you want to go ahead and start, and I'll bring up the screen as you're talking, but you're on a couple different social media platforms.
Yeah, so the godsgirl.substack, so just godsgirl.substack.com is probably the best. There you go.
And I love your Substack is awesome. And if you're not able to see the screen, you guys, she literally puts like all of her all the information. She has videos. You also have a YouTube channel, right, Tracy?
I do. Yep. There we go.
I'm God Girl with a Z.
Yeah.
And you're also on Twitter with the same name. I'm God's Girl. I am GODZGURL. And I will also have that in the show notes too. Is there anywhere else that you're at, Tracy?
Nope, that's it. Thanks, Emma.
You're welcome. And then Ron, where can people find your book?
Amazon.
Woo! Look at that book, you guys. This is the best book ever. You guys need to get it. It's fantastic. I'm telling you, like, it's meaty. So there's a lot in it. The thing that I really like about it is the entire beginning is like sort of an appendix where it gives the definitions of a lot of keywords that he uses throughout the book. There's like a whole education in the beginning of the book before you even get to the story. And then Ron covers his story in depth. It's phenomenal. It's extremely well written. There's so much information in here. Ron really did us a great favor by creating this for us and for giving us this detailed outline of his family, of his targeting, of MKUltra. It's a really deep insight into his life, and it's going to educate you guys at the same time because it's sort of built that way. It shares a story, but it's really an education tool to learn about this stuff in depth and to get the terminology for it. to learn the definitions. There's just so much in here that's really valuable, including photos. He has photos of his childhood and of different characters in his life and in different moments too. So it's really special. So I'm going to have all of that in the show notes, and I want you guys to please go support Ron and Tracy. They do a lot of volunteering their time. Just even today, they've spent like 4 hours with me. So I'm super grateful, and there was so much information covered on this. They do this for free. A lot of their content is free. Obviously, Ron's doing interviews. The most I can say is just please, if you're feeling charitable, if you're feeling like you want to learn more, donate directly to survivors. Go right to their sites, sign up for it, go subscribe. A lot of that is free. Share interviews, share content. Buy a book, buy Ron's book, and give it as a gift to somebody that cares about this stuff or who doesn't. Help wake them up that way. It's really easy, really affordable. It doesn't take much effort on your end. I always get asked, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? Go right and support survivors. Like, go right in the show notes, go to all the links that I post, hit follow, hit subscribe, hit purchase, go email them. They're super accessible and very, very good with helping. So I encourage you guys to please go support them. And you guys, thank you so much for coming on. This was an honor having both of you. My head's like exploding with information because this topic is definitely newer for me than a lot to just understand as a whole and to understand the details. And you guys painted in a lot of different lines for me that, I had questions about too. And I'm glad that the audience asked some really good questions. So thank you guys so much for coming on today.
Thank you,
You're
Emma.
welcome. It was
Great.
interesting and provocative. And Emma, thank you very much for your efforts. You're a shining star.
Aw, it's a team effort. So I'm just doing what everybody should be doing. You guys are the real heroes, being able to talk about these really horrible things. I feel in society, the least that we can do if we didn't go through this stuff is listen and share and educate, So I really appreciate you guys, and it's always an honor having you guys on and getting to talk to you. You guys light up my life and have such good energy, and you guys fill my cup. So thank you for being here. And thank you guys so much for supporting and listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.